Welcome to Therapy JA. My name is Stephen Roper. I am the founder, director of therapyja.com. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Karen Carpenter. She is a renowned sexologist and clinical sexologist. I'm sorry. So as I said, like the point of Therapy JA is to just to show how mental health is easily accessible, to break that stigma. You never get embarrassed for saying you need to go to the dentist. You never get embarrassed when you have to go to the doctor for a checkup. And you should not get embarrassed to go to the therapist for a checkup as well. So that is the point of this interview series. And I'm very thankful and appreciative for Dr. Carpenter for sitting down with us to speak about sexology. So Dr. Carpenter, if you could just introduce yourself and tell the guests, who you are and what exactly sexology is.
Sure. And one of the things I'd like for your audience to know is what it takes to be a qualified sexologist, obviously, because one of the things that we're very concerned about and keen about at Jamaican Psychological Society is that we give access to qualified, registered, and trained experienced therapists. So a clinical sexologist, which is what I am, is often someone who has a PhD already in psychology. So they're already a psychologist or working in aligned fields. And then they do clinical sexology as a specialization. It's what we call a postdoc. So we choose our specializations as psychologists, and I chose sexuality because I was working at the university and realized that as a developmental psychologist, people who were coming to me as adults at various stages of their adult journey of learning were having challenges that some of them originated in childhood. So these were developmental issues as well and had suffered trauma, but they didn't feel that they could talk to people about it. And the fact that they kept coming to me to speak about it made me want to be properly qualified to work in the field. And I was also working in HIV prevention and control as a researcher with the Ministry of Health. Those two things combined with my natural curiosity about human beings led me to go and take courses overseas in this area.
Beautiful, beautiful. Could you tell me, like, what is a major misconception that Jamaicans may have in terms of with sexology or sex?
Yes. Well, first of all, one of the plain and ordinary misconceptions is we use the word sex to mean intercourse. Sex does not mean intercourse. Sex does not mean a penis and a vagina or any other body part in any other body part. Sex means everything concerned with our sexuality. And it's actually a very broad area of study, from gynecology and urology to, which is, how we deal with male and female bodies in their reproductive capacities, to the performance of sex and sexuality, which I like to tell people is outer course, intercourse, and all courses. So it's not just intercourse, it's everything to do with how you see yourself, your self-concept as a sexual person, how you enter the world as a sexual person, and the experiences that bring you here.
Okay, lovely. Wow, that was a mouthful. So I think, as I said, one of the main things I wanted to discuss was in terms of for men that may be struggling with low self-esteem, depressive issues, and it may be difficult for them to even like date or struggle with like relationships, because I feel like men in general, it's very a man bases his identity on if he can provide or what he has. And if he's not able to provide, especially in like a series where it's difficult for him to have a job or something, his sense of confidence may be diminished, where he will not feel, that he's able to secure.
And I would say that, I'd say that men are stereotypically, because we have to be clear that it's not all men, but a stereotype of the man is that he must provide, protect, and I would add to that, perform. So provide, protect, and perform sexually. And those things in our societies make you qualify as being a man. So if you're not able to provide, that diminishes your man quotient. If you're not able to protect, then you're less of a man. And certainly if you can't perform sexually, then what's the point of a man? And I think that we have latched onto that as a way of deciding if a person is worthy or not. And it takes both men and women in the society, young men and women in the society, each successive generation, to address that and to come up with more contemporary measures of what a man or woman is. Now, you mentioned depression. I like to tell people in very simple terms, depression is looking back with regret, and anxiety is anticipating and looking forward with catastrophe. So when we're anxious, our brain is racing forward and it's predicting the worst things that can happen. And when we're depressed, we're looking backward and we're regretting things that have happened. Yes? So if we can bring the mind to the present, we can help to, through talk therapy and other therapies, to bring the person to a reality of what is and what can be changed. And that's essentially what we seek to do with those two conditions.
Well, why do you think that, like, because having depression and anxiety, the way how you explain it is like, wow, because you are regretting the past, and then you are having anxious for the
anticipating,
anticipating the worst, and normally it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where in interaction,
absolutely, because we want it to be confirmed. We want to believe we're right in what we think. So if I think the sky is purple, there's nothing that you're going to tell me that's going to make me see the sky is blue, unless I change my own mental constructs about what the color blue is and what the color purple is. You and I may be seeing the same thing, but my interpretation of what I'm seeing is it's purple. Yes?
Are there what suggestions or exercises would you recommend to men to deal with that?
Well, a lot of what we would do in the smaller exercises of psychology has come into the mainstream now with the practice of coaches, etc., etc. And we're sharing a lot more of some of our therapies in socials. I want to be careful to put a disclaimer for pop psychology, which is not psychology, but there is some good stuff out there. For instance, mindfulness practices. If you can actually find a good mindfulness coach or go to one of the accredited sites and find some mindfulness information, then you can begin to help yourself to be very much present tense. Help yourself to come back from the anxiety, come back from the depression, and to do a little bit of your own self-therapy. I would also caution that both anxiety and depression come on a continuum. So it's not just anxiety, 0.5. Yeah? You could have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. You could have depression 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. So not all depressions are the same. Not all anxieties are the same. And some will require medication and long-term treatment. So I don't want to rule out medication or seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist from that equation. But the simplest thing that you can do for yourself is find a good mindfulness program online.
Okay, thank you. Oh, that's very good. So, like, how do you see mental health addressed in Jamaica when it comes to like sexual competence? Do you think we have a healthy view of it? So, when I say that, I mean in terms of struggles and.
I think you're asking the right question, actually. And I'm happy that you use the word healthy rather than good or bad, because psychology is not about good or bad. It's what's good for you, good for others. So with the principle of do no harm in mind, then we can talk about what is healthy. And do we have a healthy view to sexuality in Jamaica? I would say we have a very adolescent way of dealing with sexuality in Jamaica as a society, not individuals, but as a society. We are behaving as if our genitals are new. We've never seen them before. It's a surprise. Oh my God, I have genitals. And now I'm going to use these genitals in a random fashion because I'm just testing it to see how it works. We were born with them. but we're behaving like adolescents who have just come into their sexuality. So we've been having sex for as long as we've been on the planet, but all of a sudden, sex has become this thing in the last, well, I wouldn't say all of a sudden, since the Victorian era, it's become this thing that you're hush hush about. It's dirty, it's nasty. And also, we want to do the dirty and the nasty with somebody. And that's why we have this great secrecy around it. So Jamaica is a contradiction. Sex is everywhere. Everything has sexual innuendos in it. And sex is also hush hush and hidden. And that's why I say it's an adolescent. If we were adults, we would admit that it's everywhere. We'd admit that it's natural and normal. And actually, polls that have been done show that Jamaicans do see sex as normal and a natural part of life. But the way we speak about it is as if we've only just discovered that people are having sex. Yeah? So we're very adolescent. We need to take a more mature approach to sex and sexuality. And just what I always say, we tell lie on God and we tell lie on sex. The two things we tell lies about. We use God for our own purposes and we lie about sex.
That's a very true point. Do you think it's that the church has something to do with that in terms of how we can be so repressed when it comes to like not talking about sex?
The church clearly has something to do with it. In a nation that 62.4% of the population claim to be Christians, yes, and that's a diminishing number. That was in 2011. It's less now. It's closer to 50% now. And you have a good 47% perhaps who are neither Christians nor affiliated with any religion. We've had Christianity held up to us as a society, as a badge of respectability. So if you are poor, if you have few means, and you have no way of being respectable, you're going to hold on to the thing that makes you a member of society, a good and upstanding member of society. Yeah? And that's going to be church membership. And that requires that you lie about your sexuality because church people don't have sex. They have baptism and babies are born. Yes, but they do not have sex. These babies come from God.
I said there's this trend that, well, because I'm in the church, grew up in the church. My father is a pastor, you know, so I grew up in the church.
Yes, I know that.
Yeah, but I always saw it where some of us would call it, and I don't want to sound judgmental, but you would see certain girls come to church, start coming to church at a certain point in their lives, party heavy in them 20s, them start reaching that point, and them start come church. You know what I mean? And so we used to always say, boy, you know, it's like a rebrand for some of them. You know, and men as well, you know, you have some men where go hard and
I remind you that churches are full of sinners. If you were a saint, you wouldn't be in the church. What do you need a church for? If you're already a saint, why do you need to go to church?
And I think it's funny you say that because, and you have so many like single moms that happen in the church, and so many people still getting pregnant within the church, you know?
Well, we get pregnant with or without the church because we're human. And that's what the human body is for. It's not because of the church. It's what we're on the planet for. Otherwise, we become extinct. We become like the dinosaurs. So the other thing that is curious about the church, though, Stephen, is look at your church populations and take a head count. The church population reflects the population of the educational uptake. You will see that there are more women and children in church than there are men. That's a very telling.
It is. A lot of times women will, you know, sometimes they'll come and they say there are not enough men, and they'll bring men that aren't Christian. You know what I mean? They'll try and bring them into the church.
Exactly, the Christian. A Christian doesn't mean that you don't have sex. We're talking about sexuality. We're not talking about a person's belief system. You could be from any belief system. The fact of the matter is that church provides that kind of instruction and repression for women, but not for men. All those women sitting there who are hearing the news are expected to behave themselves. Why is it that it isn't men in the church being told to behave themselves?
But I think it's more, appreciated if a man, like this happened recently at my church where one of the members got a girl pregnant outside of marriage, and there was like a.
He didn't get
Huh?
her pregnant. He didn't get her pregnant.
What you mean?
It's like when someone like get a baby. He didn't get her pregnant. They had sex and they both got pregnant.
Okay.
Attributed some to her ovum and they got pregnant.
Okay, true, but
it was an accident.
yeah, it was an accident. But the approach of the church was to.
Expected. It was unexpected, but it doesn't mean it's an accident. Sex has a natural corollary, which is pregnancy. That is a natural corollary of sex. So unless we do something preventative, we're going to get pregnant. They just had bareback sex. That's all. That's all it proves. They were having sex before,
Yeah. No, man, it's true. It's true. What you're saying is very true. So I kind of wanted to ask you something about pornography. You brought up pornography in the church, and I think it's very rampant now, and especially for men. Like a lot of men know because as I said, struggling with depression and anxiety, pornography can be an escape for them. But how they interact with pornography and then how they interact with dating are just two completely different things, because they realize what you're watching is a performance and it's not like a real.
It would be good if they realize. It would be excellent if they realized it was a performance and these are stunt bodies, these are fillers, and the camera points to one thing and points to another, repeats something from a scene that they'd seen before. The industries of pornography and sex toys cater to two different demographics. Pornography is a man's fantasy of what sex would look like if he was performing at his best. And sex toys are designed for women. If you go into a sex shop, you'll see that most of the things that are in the shop are actually catering to female tastes and female pleasure. The pornography industry is not growing as fast as the sex toy industry. And there are meters online, there are clocks online that are ticking away that show you the extent to which both industries are growing. And you will see that the sex toy industry is growing faster, which means that women are seeking out more sexual pleasure than they were previously. So they're not just having sex for reproduction or to please a man, but they're having sex for themselves now, and therefore they want greater pleasure.
Okay. You think, so with men, with pornography, it leads to a lot of them young men having erectile dysfunction because they're so desensitized.
I disagree. Okay. That's not the cause of erectile dysfunction. Masturbation is something that takes place, even some scientists say, in the womb. I like to think developmentally that it begins as early as 2 and 3. Yeah. It's used for self-soothing in children. They don't know it's connected to anything to do with intercourse because young children don't know that they have internal organs. Young children don't know anything about an innie and an outie. They only know about sensation. So they use masturbation as a way of calming themselves. And sometimes you'll see young children rocking, or they'll actually touch themselves, but they don't necessarily have to touch themselves to self-soothe. So the minute we're born, we're sexual. As we get older, that masturbatory practice becomes different for different people. And certainly in adolescence, when we're supposed to be interested in sex, we're supposed to be sexually aware because our hormones are telling us, find a mate, find a mate, find a mate. Yeah? Yeah. And some people who are restricted in their sexual practice will self-pleasure through masturbation, and they'll use pornography for the images. I disagree entirely that pornography is any cause of anything. Pornography doesn't cause anything. There are people who are happily pornographic in their viewing, etc., who are perfect, good, upstanding citizens and do not have erectile dysfunction. Pornography doesn't lead to erectile dysfunction. It doesn't lead to people treating people in any particular that is the ill treatment of each other. A society that's ignorant sexually. If we about sex, then pornography becomes
So so you're saying it's not pornography, it's more the person that would have these issues,
the
or
individual. It's the individual that's taking their issues forward, and these issues begin, and that's why you go to a psychologist. Solve the problem by yourself, just by pornography, then you would do it. Oh, I've stopped watching porn, and therefore you're stopping watching porn has nothing to do with your erectile dysfunction, but it might have been interfering in your life in other ways.
that's interesting. Can I ask you, like, okay, what misconceptions do men have about women in dating? Jump like that, you would say, and what misconceptions do women have about men with dating?
So I was speaking about male-female stimulation, and that women need stimulation of the clitoris in order to orgasm, and that a man thrusting his penis inside the vaginal canal will not bring her to an orgasm unless the feet of the clitoris are deeply embedded in the anterior wall of the vaginal canal. The vaginal canal is a birth canal. That's what it's for. And only the first thirds of the vaginal canal receives stimulation. The rest of it is quite, how should I say, has very few nerve endings. It's very delicate. It's like the inside of your mouth. If you do that on the inside of your jaw, you have the same kind of tissue inside the vagina. And that's why a blowjob feels good, because it imitates the vagina, right? So when a man thrusts deeply into the vagina or the vaginal canal, because the vagina is the whole thing, they're really psychologically stimulating, and they're stimulating themselves, because when they pull out, each time they pull out, the corona gets stimulated by the tight end of the vagina, right? So they get stimulation, but a woman is not getting much stimulation. The purpose of that deep thrusting that we're inclined to do is to deposit the ejaculate near the womb, the mouth of the womb, which is called the os, so that the woman can get pregnant. And there's a little shelf in the vagina, right at that point where the mouth of the womb is. So it bellies out a bit to catch any sperm that might collect there. And I was saying that men have anywhere between 20 to 150, some say 200 million sperm per 1.5 millimeter of an ejaculate. So an ejaculation contains millions of sperm. So we are more likely to become pregnant from an ejaculation, unprotected sex, bareback sex, than not get pregnant. So it always surprises me when people are surprised that they got pregnant. Because the odds are stacked against you. Nature intends you to become pregnant. So unless you're using some kind of contraceptive, nature is plotting your demise the minute it starts the attraction. That's the job that nature has. Because nature is in control of that part of things. And we have that brain that says instinctually, this is what we need to do. Yeah? Nobody needs a sex manual to know how to have sex. Isn't that funny? By the time you come to have sex, you pretty much know what you're supposed to do. You might get a few things wrong technically, but chances are 9 out of 10 people don't need somebody to tell them where to put what. Right?
True. I have to say though, because I've heard cases of this. I don't know if you know about this, where women that have abortions earlier, it becomes a lot more difficult for them to conceive. Like I've had some friends that have had that problem.
That's for so many reasons. That's for so many reasons. You know, the one that we warn against is not so much a botched abortion. That would be a botched abortion. That would be an abortion that was performed badly and incorrectly. Yes? That could lead to infertility. What we find in higher cases of infertility is STIs. The more sexually transmitted infections you have, the more you're likely to have. And the more you have, the more likely you are to be infertile. That doesn't mean that all infertile persons have had sexually transmitted infections. It just means that if you continue to have STIs, you will have a greater likelihood for being infertile. That's what it means. But no, abortions properly performed by a qualified and trained obstetrician gynecologist ought not to leave you infertile. And many women go on to have children after an abortion, and several children. It's not uncommon.
I've had some friends doing that. Them tell me they've never really liked the guy. Them get pregnant. I say, you know, they couldn't afford the abortion. And them just say, boy, I'm just gonna keep it. And I'm just like, really? You want to keep it with somebody you're really not into? Because a child is like it's a lifelong attachment.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And again, you know, human beings are like onions. You have to peel away all the layers. We're very complex. So we can't generalize about why that person might keep the child or not, or what their fears or interests are. It could be that they're not fear driven. They could be driven by something else. A moral obligation, their age at the time, all sorts of things.
I want to ask you though, also, like, what about like the LGBTQ? Do you feel like they've been given? It's not as difficult. Let me not say difficult because I feel like it's still rough for them people. What are the challenges faced by the LGBTQ when it comes to like sex in the Caribbean, or even the stigma attached?
That's a hard one. I've done my outreach with the LGBTQ plus community for more than 30 years. That's the community I work with the most. And outside of the community, people's perceptions may be stuck in a rut. Within the community, it's another matter. Yeah? So it's difficult to speak in general terms about it because one, the generation that is now giving us the information on the LGBTQ community is a younger generation. So they're experiencing young people's problems. And the community that was 3 generations ago experienced different problems. I can't say that it is more difficult or less difficult because it depends on who your partner is. It depends on who your friends are. It depends on the community that you become a part of. So I often ask people, why do you need to know if somebody's gay? Why is it important? If the person is not interested in you sexually, why is it important? How does it affect you? If my practices as a heterosexual person, and let's say I claim to be heterosexual, if my practices are the same as the practices of someone who claims to be LGBTQ, how does it affect you as long as I'm not practicing it with you? So we can't take the stance that sex is private, intimate, and between 2 or more persons in the privacy of their own homes when it is heterosexual, and take an opposite view that it is public, it is my business, and I should regulate it when it's between 2 persons who are same-sex attracted. Citizenry gives all of us the same rights. If you're a citizen of a country, you have the same rights, no matter the color of your skin, the height, the hair on your head, and your sexual preferences. And you have the same rules that you have to follow. Don't molest children. Don't do certain acts. Don't be violent against people. These are the same rules that govern all of us. So why is it important? I can't see in what social context it's important to know someone's sexual preference. That's a challenge for me. Mhm. What are you thinking?
Well, I know, man. I'm just listening to what you're saying. And I'm just, yeah, I agree. I'm more honestly, my mind is still back on what you were saying about the pornography, as in not affecting. Because I know so many friends that have like that struggle with erectile dysfunction, and we were all thought that it's because of the desensitization.
Erectile dysfunction is more common in young men than we imagine. We have this myth that says if you're young, you eat good food, you can't stand up. That's ridiculous. How does it become a rule that every human being should have the same degree of performance, level of performance? We have to look at what challenges a person is going through at the time. We have to look at whether or not this is, let me tell you the 3 criteria that we use to determine if a sexual dysfunction is a dysfunction.
Okay.
We want to know if it's lifelong. That's what we call a generalized disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Has the person always experienced this from the first time they tried to have sex? We want to know if it's partner specific. Is it only with a particular partner that they experience this? And then we want to know if it's situation specific. Is it only when the in-laws are over, or the children are banging on the door, or they have a problem at work that this happens? And we have to look at all of those. Yes? And those will help us to determine whether or not it's psychogenic inside the person or psychological inside their mind. And that's what we have to determine. And if it is psychogenic inside the person, then we send them to a urologist. If it is psychological, then we send them to a sex therapist.
I have to say though, a lot of men, I feel like women in general wouldn't really be accepting if the man kind of have, if the man not performing, and them will kind of, you know what I mean? If it's a long-term relationship, maybe.
Well, let me ask you a question, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
If the man is not performing by having intercourse,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the only thing he's willing to do, then why wouldn't the woman be upset? If a man believes mythically that his penis should satisfy a woman and every woman, and women should be satisfied with just his penis, when their sexual pleasure doesn't come from thrusting, why wouldn't the woman be dissatisfied? He's setting it up for dissatisfaction right there. Because this is not where she gets her pleasure. And even if she gets a psychological pleasure out of the idea of being penetrated and the intimacy and closeness that it brings, she's not getting physical pleasure from it in the way the man is getting it. So why shouldn't she be dissatisfied if the tiny modicum of pleasure that she's getting is now removed? And the man is not willing to try anything else. He's not willing to experiment with toys. He's not willing to look at how she's pleasured. He thinks she should be satisfied with his penis. I think that's a very childish approach. That's what children do. Children are very black and white. Yeah? When we become an adult, we realize that most of life is lived in the gray area. It's hardly black and white.
Wow. Okay, and I had one more question, because men have this stigma that if you're not a gallus, you're not really sexually competent. But then as a man, you kind of realize that women kind of share that same view, where a woman will it's like, what makes a man attractive to a woman is more that other women want him more than any other thing. And
that's not true.
Yeah.
So let's make some distinctions here. Let's make some distinctions. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about the bad girl, bad guy out on the road partying, etc. And then they come to church to sanitize, and this is a new them, the born again. Yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's look at situations. If you are in the, what I call, is it a fling or a long-term thing? If you're in the fling stage of your life, where you want variety and you want Baskin Robbins and you want the 16 flavors and you want to try everything, then yes, you might be interested in someone who's tried a lot because you believe that a man should have more experience than you, and you want to be initiated by someone who has some experience because you don't have any. But when you decide to settle down, that very man who was quote unquote, a dog on the streets, mean between the sheets, you don't want him to settle down with. Why? He's unreliable. He's a gallus. Him have too much woman. You can't trust him. So I think it's situational.
But you don't.
Just as men don't want the same woman that they play with to take home.
True.
So why do we think women are any different? That's man-made.
From what we see,
that's man-made. No, the
like,
irony is that it's men that say those things.
What?
Men carry that narrative. Yes? But they don't ask women. And I often say to men, you know, if you ever sat down and you were a fly on the wall and heard women talking about men, you'd be shocked. You'd be absolutely shocked at what women say about men.
I feel like women won't share that though. I feel like there's a stigma of them being judged, even though a lot of men won't judge them, but I feel like they have this fear.
Share it, you know. I'm not recommending that they're shared, but I'm saying that if men could overhear what women say when they're speaking honestly to each other, men would not hold these views that they hold. But men talk to men and circulate views that are ridiculous. And then not asking women.
I mean, okay, so I hold the view that women, you know, why I said that is just because it's just how women operate. Well, let me not say, okay, I don't want to sound...
There you go again.
No, hold on. But there have been many situations where, you know, like, let's say I give you a hypothetical. You're walking a venue, you're walking by yourself as a man. You know, people not really pay attention to you. You're walking with 2 or 3 women. You know, subconsciously, women will kind of just like pre you, or they'll notice you more.
If you're walking with 2 or 3 women, they will, because they don't know whether or not you're attached to any of them. If you're walking with one woman, they're not necessarily going to pay attention to you more than they would with somebody who's single. And I would say that it's not every woman who competes with other women. That's not about the man. That's about the other woman. Yes? The man is secondary to her looking at the man with a woman and thinking, oh, I could get that guy. Yeah? That's a competition with the other woman. So we have to understand the dynamics of human attraction. And yes, of course, we're going to be more attracted to someone who even occasionally has a partner than someone who never has a partner. If you keep seeing the same person over and over and over, and they never have a partner, you're either going to assume they're a player, therefore they never come with a partner, or they have no game. You're going to go to extremes. Yes? Yes? Okay.
Boy, that in itself is another topic, man. Especially men that feel like, boy, them not have enough confidence. Yeah, that is a... yeah, boy, okay. I know you have, you have to...
Yeah, I'm leaving you now.
Okay, so what would you recommend for men to gain? Because a lot of men really do base their identity off of this. If they feel like they're not able to, get married or, and you have, wow, I even forgot to ask you about that. So, two questions, right? So what do you think about men that feel like they're not getting that, they're not able to secure a woman in them home country, so them decide, say, they're gonna go abroad, forget a woman. They call them the passport bros. It's the passport bros movement.
Yeah, and nothing is wrong with going abroad to get a partner.
Really?
What if your sensibilities, yeah? What if your sensibilities, your interests, etc., would not make you ideal for the market that's there, that's available for marriage? What's wrong with going overseas and finding somebody who's like-minded, who has similar interests, concerns, and core values? Because it comes down to core values, Outside of attraction, what builds longevity into a relationship is shared core values. Yeah? The core value around sex, the core value around family, the core value around money, around in-laws, about how the duties are shared, and how the children are raised. Those are the 5 flashpoints for long-term relationships. And if your core values don't align in that area, it's irrelevant what color your skin is, what language you speak, or where you come from. You need those core values to align. So if 2 people from 2 different cultures have the same core values, they can overcome a lot of obstacles. But if two people from the same culture have different core values, the obstacles will multiply because one has a knock-on effect on the other. And I think we perhaps don't know ourselves well enough to be able to choose a partner that's best suited to us and not for our friends. You're not choosing the partner for your friend.
Oh, say, and that's for like men and women where them choose somebody where them friend impressed with, like them friend like more than they.
Yes, that you see, we've come to a generation in the last 2 generations. I don't say it's this generation because thankfully Gen Zs have no, well, we're now at Alpha, right? We've gone now to Alpha.
Yeah.
Gen Zs have thankfully kind of moved away in some ways from the it girl, it guy idea and meeting the expectations of others. They're much more ecologically conscious. They live on their socials, yes, but in different ways. Yeah. The previous generation, I think, was far more concerned with the wedding, the party with the pretty dress and the tuxedo, than the marriage. And a wedding is not a marriage. In fact, and I tell my own grown adult children, the people that I think should get married are the ones who don't want to get married, but stay together. Why? If you don't need marriage to keep you together, then you're ideal for marriage because you've already committed.
In the situations of that though, isn't it that they said that, because I've heard that like men normally in situations where it's in-house, they're not married, them just living together. Do you think that the man loses the respect for the woman? Because why wouldn't he want to marry her?
Not at all, because marriage is not an end goal for everybody. Many people do not see marriage as a destination. Many people look at their parents' marriages, and because we're fed a fairy tale of what marriage should be, when they look at the reality of marriage for their parents or their grandparents, they say, but if that's marriage, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Why do I want it if that's how it works? Why not just stay as I am and still have that relationship? And the couples that come to me, certainly the ones who will stay together and be committed with or without the marriage, those are the people who should be considering marriage. If you need marriage in order to stay with somebody, you should leave. You should leave. That means you're not staying with a person. You're not there for the individual.
But what would you consider as a grounds of leaving a marriage? Because some people argue.
Goodness, that's not for me to decide. That's not for me to decide. There's so many. There's so many. And as a therapist, my job is never to tell a couple to split up.
Yeah.
Except where there's harm. Yeah. So the
like
rule of
emotional
thumb,
or physical?
any kind of harm, do no harm is a rule of thumb. So where there is harm for either party or the children or anyone involved, then we have a legal obligation to report. But it's never my job, and I tell couples from we start therapy, I will never tell you whether to leave or stay. I will challenge you on whether you leave or stay, but I will never make that decision for you. It is not my decision to make. Therapy is a place to visit. It's not a place to live.
Ooh, wow, okay. So you don't believe in people doing checkups?
Therapy is a place to visit. It's not a place to live.
So you don't believe, so if someone is doing therapy.
You cannot live in therapy. You have to go live your life. Therapy is supposed to assist you in living your life. It's a place to visit. And it's very nice when you're in the office with me. Everything is lovely. But it's not a place to stay, and you cannot stay with me all day long.
On that note, that wraps up our segment with Dr. Karen Carpenter. Thank you so much for this. This was amazing. You gave me some great points. I really hope down the line we can do this again.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah, this was very good. Yes, man. So wait, hold on. Doctor, I just need you to tell people where they can, get in contact with you. Yeah, what's your Instagram, your YouTube?
Okay. I'm on all socials. And I think the best way to get in touch with me is drkarencarpenter.com. drkarencarpenter.com. And that will lead you to all my socials, all my services, and look forward to seeing you. Bye.
Yeah. I never know that in terms of what you said about pornography. And also, yeah, what you were saying about dating, that was very interesting. You know, 'cause
Pornography, if we align it to masturbation, we'll see what the stigma is. The stigma is not about pornography. The stigma is about masturbation. It's about solo sex. And if people don't know how to pleasure themselves, how can they ask anyone to pleasure them? Never ask anybody to do for you what you're not willing to do for yourself. I'm going to leave you.
Okay, all right.
Take care.
Take care.